I'm very excited to be on here today because this topic, going from unhealthy to healthy relationships, is one that I think a lot of us can resonate with, especially when we don't feel like we've ever seen or witnessed a healthy relationship before in others or in our lives. So it can kind of make us feel like, is it ever going to happen? And so joining me today, I have Valerie Adams from The Mindful Babe, who is going to talk all about her experiences, and she's here now, and I'll just invite her on. And it's going to be a really great chat to go from that place of feeling like you can't have this to actually living and experiencing a healthy relationship. Valerie, hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm amazing. How are you?
I'm equally amazing. I got to say, I have been dying to do a live with you for ages just because as I've obviously gotten to know you over time, I'm just like, I need to just share this woman's wisdom with everyone.
Oh, thank you, Ken. Thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. So, for the benefit of my audience who may not know who you are, I'd love if you can share who you are, what you do, and how you came to be doing what you're doing now.
Yeah. So, my name is Valerie Adams, and I am the creator of the Mindful Babe brand. I've had my coaching business since late 2018. I think I took my first client in October 2018 and really had to focus on mindset coaching. And the whole reason why I decided to, go crazy, leave my corporate job, leave the stability to pursue my own thing is because I had gone through so much growth in my own life. I really had I don't want to say a knack, but a gift really to just see possibility for people. I love one-on-one interpersonal conversation like this, and it's always been my dream to support women on a deep level. And so I started my business off as a mindset coach, and while that was so great, I found that I really had a deep interest for supporting women in attracting the partner of their dreams, because I know you feel this way too, Ken. It's like
Mhm.
what we attract in our life is a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. So, partners that we entertain, friendships, it's all a mirror of the way we see ourselves, the way we value ourselves. And that was something I struggled with for over 10 years, attracting partners who, I felt unworthy around because I felt unworthy with myself. So when I was able to heal, go on this massive transformational journey and really heal those things, I then knew I had to support women who maybe weren't there yet or maybe really wanted to start their healing journey. So for the last 2 years, July 2019 was when I said, okay, I'm niching down. I'm going to support women around dating and mindset. It's been about 2 years of that. And even now, I'm really excited because I'm going to be expanding my business and supporting women who are maybe already in partnership and really focusing on transformation. But that's really a high level overview of how I got to where I am today.
I think that was amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think we are definitely what we experience in life in the present is a reflection of how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that in many times we're unconscious of both the good and the bad that we have in our lives until we gain that self awareness and start to make changes to prioritize what makes us feel good. Very hard to do that if we're locked into survival mode, if we're not even aware of our own patterns of behavior and how they relate to upbringing. And I think that for many people, I'm sure you've had this experience too. I have a lot of clients. They come to me when they realize that moment of, oh my goodness, I don't think I've ever experienced a healthy relationship. They then ask the next question, which is, well, what the hell does a healthy relationship look like and feel like? Because I've only ever known, narcissistic relationships, which are extremely hot and cold. Then there's the other variation of that in the emotional unavailable partners who have their own version of hot and cold. And so it's kind of like, well, if that's all the stuff that, our films, our books, our movies are constantly shoving down our throats and saying, let's romanticize love and relationships, what the hell's healthy? Love to hear your thoughts on that, especially based on your experiences from going from one to the other.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the way I describe it is it's like knowing a relationship is healthy, think about how you feel when you're not with that person. So
Mm.
for me in my past, I had attracted partners who I put on a pedestal. I felt like they were more worthy than me. And it started from a young age. I would be really drawn to like the class clown, the guy who, you know, everyone thought was really funny, or in college, like, you know, someone in a fraternity and they were popular. And it was like, I always was drawn to men who took up a lot of space, who really weren't afraid to shine their light, because I felt like, oh, if I could date them or if I could be in their world, what would that say about me? What would, you know, how much more worthy would I be? And so, you know, it started this pattern. It wasn't necessarily that I chased, but it was like this mission. I was like, oh, perfect. You're emotionally unavailable. You're scared to get hurt. Like, you've never been in a relationship. Let me be the one to change your mind. And so that was kind of my energy. And so I never felt safe and secure if those did turn into relationships, because remember, I started on the foot of, you're the prize, and, you know, who do I need to be to get you? And so I felt like I constantly had to almost like be on an audition every day to still, you know, be worthy of being in a relationship with them. So I felt like I had no space to relax. I was always in fear in those relationships, scared that one day he would just be like, hey, I don't want to be with you anymore. So it was almost like I had to do something new every day to still enroll that person to be with me. Like, I remember not feeling like I could wear loose fitting clothes. Like, oh, I have to always look really great, always wear really tight clothes, so he, you know, is attracted to me. I would really suppress my emotions because I was so scared of, you know, being difficult or high maintenance. So I would be really passive aggressive because I'd be holding stuff in. And yeah, I felt very, very anxious in relationships. So my relationship with Ryan, I feel zero of that. And I feel really secure when we're not together as well, which is a really big sign, because I find, especially when you're attracting someone emotionally unavailable, you feel almost like incomplete when they're not around, or you're like, oh my God, when am I going to hear from them next? It's that feeling of like, I got to hear from them. I got to know they're still interested in me. And so when that's not present, that's a really great indicator that you've either attracted someone who is a secure attachment style, or it's a healthy relationship, or both.
I could not agree more with you. Thank you very much for sharing all of that, because I think you're absolutely right. I think, man, there's so much that I want to pull apart from that. You know, dating the class clown, I mean, I can relate to that in my own version. Like, for me, my type was always dating the guys who were looking more like they were sophisticated, they had their stuff sorted, they were well groomed, they spoke maybe a second language. And I realized to my horror only recently that this type that I'd subconsciously built in my head was basically things that I just didn't think I had in myself, or were things that I thought I needed at the time. And then when I realized, no, actually, I don't need any of that, you know, I was like, actually, that's not a very attractive type at all, because it's literally emotionally unavailable. And you're right. Like, when you talk about the anxiety that you feel when you're dating these partners, because I know I've felt that, it's so painful. It's so anxiety inducing, because we don't get the reassurance we need. And we blame ourselves by saying we're being needy, we're being difficult, they're such a great person, you know, and we create these stories about how we're not even worthy, because, as you mentioned, we put these people on pedestals and we think, oh my God, I need this person in my life. And if I don't have that person, I will die. And ironically enough, I think that's how a lot of people feel when they inevitably have an abrupt breakup from these kind of situations too. I mean, it's really, I think, very self-abandoning in many ways, because we lose sight of our own wants and needs in favor of just pleasing another person. And I've gone into depth talking about where a lot of this stuff comes from, basically from very, you know, conditionally loving childhoods and such. But I think that, you know, as much as that awareness helps, I think that what you're saying about safety, security, with what you have with Ryan, is so important. But I want to ask you a question on this too, because this is something that can happen to people who may be, you know, thinking, oh, well, I've got a safe, secure partner, but I don't feel any connection or chemistry with them. What's the distinction, have you found, like, between the relationship you have with Ryan versus someone who might be a great person, but you're just like, look, I don't feel anything for this connection?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before entering a relationship with someone, you definitely want to make sure you feel that. It definitely grows over time. I personally, I mean, I don't feel like it's normal to go on a first date and just feel these like intense butterflies and the spark, and that can happen. But I think sometimes we romanticize this idea of the whole like, when and you'll just, right when you meet them, you'll know. And we think that love happens in a moment, but it actually happens very gradually. And for me, trust is a number one core value of mine. So seeing Ryan continually show up, even call when he said he was going to, check in often, be his word, that made him more attractive in my eyes. And he's also a secure partner. So I wasn't thinking like, oh my God, I need to have this insane spark, but I really was focusing on my core values. So that's one thing, is to know what your core values are. The second, because I have heard this sometimes, that the idea of someone secure can sound boring, or it's like the nice guy is boring. And so that's really when it comes down to what you value in a relationship. Do you value peace? Do you value, the passion, the back and forth? And if there's not that connection with someone, it's definitely a feeling based thing. And I always ask the question, it's like, is this connection coming from fear or possibility? Like, if you decide to continue to see someone, is because you're so scared of, oh my God, they might not like me, so I better keep, trying to impress them? Or is it possibility, like, hey, I'm feeling something, I'm going to follow this feeling and see? I also think compatibility is so huge, and just being really clear on and it's not even things you would consciously think about, but little things like, what someone is passionate, or that's not little, but what they're passionate about, how they view money, right? How they view certain things. Those are all really important, but I would never, categorize, oh, secure. It's really easy in your mind to be like, oh, nice guys are boring or secure guys are boring. But for me, and also Ryan, our core values, one of them is peace. So we really value peace. And what that looks like for us is we don't let conflict linger. We don't value being passive aggressive or, going in the other room. Like, we really talk things out because we don't like to be in an awkward space with each other. So the number one thing is to get really, really clear on what you value most in a relationship, and really be clear on how you're going to learn that about someone in dating. And then the chemistry, you either feel it or you don't. But if it's not there really strong right away, it's okay. Give that person a chance to show up, and so much can unfold, but definitely don't try to force anything.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything that you just said. I think that when it comes to secure people, I completely agree. I think that there can be a bit of a feeling of like, oh, well, this person's a bit boring, like what the hell's going on? But I think that the value of those people is exactly what you said, the peace that you feel. And I think many of us consciously might say, oh, well, I want an emotionally available, secure partner. But if you're used to chaos, to drama, to the passive aggressiveness, the walking away from arguments, that's not your default. It's like, well, I don't want that, because that's not, how I feel love. And so it can be extremely challenging, I think for people where, I don't want to say they need to do more healing, but I think that they really need to dig deep and think to themselves, like, I know I had to do this too, which is like, well, what feels good and sustainable? When we talk about compatibility, I couldn't agree more. I think it's one of the most essential components of a relationship. And I also think too that when we understand for ourselves what makes us feel good consistently, and also what allows us to feel that peace consistently, I think that's really key, because I think many of us really haven't had that for a long time. And when we're operating out of a very fight or flight state, that nervous system, which then just doesn't feel good unless it's got chaos around it, it can be hard to transition into that rest, digest, into that inner peace state, because we're still doing all kinds of things 90 miles an hour, and we're not allowing ourselves to sit with the people around us and actually get a feeling for how they make us feel.
Right. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
And I think that it's just one of those things where, it sounds like for you, really connecting with your values, connecting with what feels important for you, like peace, has really been important in your relationship with Ryan, which is incredible. So with regards to, you know, helping people make that transition, what would you say has been the biggest thing that people have really needed to sort of take away in terms of like their healing journey to go from the unhealthy to the healthy? Because I think both you and also your breakup bestie Kendra both talk about you don't need to be fully healed to be in a relationship, and I completely agree. That being said, there probably needs to be a level of healing to go into this. What would you say is essential for people to really prioritize and think about?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great point. And that's the thing with healing, there's always more to heal from. Healing is a lifelong journey. So if we're in the conversation of, oh, I have to be perfect and oh my God, I still have this insecurity, or this is a pattern I have, like I can't date anyone yet. Like my relationship has been very healing. It's revealed a lot of parts about me that I never would have known that I needed to work on if I was single. Right. And so there's this idea like, oh, once I meet that person, then I'll be healed, everything will go away. But it really is a lifelong journey. And when we think about dating, the first question I would really ask is your intention for dating. Because you're right, Ken, there are people who are very unhealed and their dating is like masking, and it's like it's a way for them to avoid. And then I work with clients who are on the other end of the spectrum where they're like, oh my God, I have so much to heal from. Like I'm not ready to date, and they keep putting it off and putting it off. So there's so many different sides of the coin with that. And so while there's not one distinct answer, what I would say is firstly, what is your motive for dating? Is it coming from, is there a possibility around it? Is it coming from a place of, hey, I feel really good, I know I'm on my journey, and I'm feeling good, I'm feeling ready to meet someone who's on the same path? Or is it coming from the place of avoidance, or, oh my God, well, my ex already moved on, so I need to move on. Oh my gosh, I'm turning 33 and I need to, I need to, my clock's ticking. Like, what is the motivation? Is it driven by fear, lack, something bad will happen if you don't? Or is it coming from that space of possibility? And a question I would also ask is, what would I need to, if you're in a place right now, which some of my clients are, where they're like, I know I want to attract my person, but I don't know if I'm quite ready yet. A great question to ask yourself, ask your subconscious is, well, what would I need to feel ready? How would I know when I'm ready? And then go from there. And then you can also ask, hey, is there a way both can exist? Can I be both working on looking at healing this and be open and be taking action? So there's a lot of ways around that, but there's no like after 3 months or, after blank therapy sessions. Like it's different for every single person, and only the answer to that. I've had many clients ask, hey, like, do you think I'm ready? And it's, I'm that coach that's going to turn it back and be like, okay, well, what would you need to feel ready? Like, do you feel ready? Because no one can tell you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think there's anyone in the world who can tell someone when they're ready. And I've even said to some of my clients before we started, I've been like, look, this is really an experience about helping you raise your self-awareness so that way you feel more confident, better understanding your patterns of behavior, getting you to where you want to be, so that way you actually are able to enter this space and not feel that you need to be ashamed of your insecurities. In many cases, I think that we're so scared of how we might show up and how we might act, and also what the consequence might be of a potential relationship that goes south. And I think, honestly, a lot of that comes down to how we choose to look after ourselves too. Like, I know you're a humongous proponent of self-love, and I completely agree. And I know that whimsically, I think people look at that as like bubble baths and journaling, which have their place, but real self-love, I think, is that reparenting of ourselves and really just taking better care of our mind, what our needs are, our energy. And I know you talk a lot about this too, especially in a lot of your online classes as well. And I think that based on your, work that you've done and also the work I've done with my clients, I think that one of the most incredible things to see is when people are actually just stepping into integrity with themselves they're stepping up and being like, this doesn't feel good. I need to let you, my partner, know that I need XYZ in order to feel more secure, safe, whatever it may be. And I think that's an ultimate place of power because it really allows that person to no longer be dragged by the person on the pedestal. It
Right.
allows them to be like, you know what? This may go south, and that's okay because I know that I'm getting close to figuring out what's in alignment with me, and
Right.
this clearly isn't a good fit. And I think that it's understandable. We don't want to be brokenhearted. Like, it's a painful feeling. You and I have both gone through that hellhole. But I think that honestly, the more that we allow ourselves to choose and be like, yeah, actually, this doesn't feel good, I think that's when we gain that self trust that's necessary to actually be at our highest level of self love and also to make the right choices for ourselves. And I think holding back because of like the fear of heartbreak, I mean, I think that comes down to just a fear of like not really being able to discern what's good or not for you. How do you feel with that based on your experiences?
Yeah, totally. I mean, what I want to touch on too, because I think when it comes to a healthy relationship, there's also the understanding that your insecurities are going to flare up majorly, and it's about attracting a partner who's going to work with you through them. Just the other day with Ryan, something happened. I don't know if we had like a just, a conversation, and I started feeling anxious because my attachment style is anxious avoidant. So that's a fun combo. And I let him
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm feeling really anxious right now. I'm like, hey, after our conversation, I'm feeling really anxious right now. And he asked me, what do you need? And I'm able to know what I need. And I love what you said, Ken, around like learning how to parent yourself essentially. And that's truly what self-love is as well, is accepting yourself and not wishing you were different, knowing that there's always room to grow, but loving yourself enough to say, hey, I need support around this, or hey, I'm not all the way healed from this, so here's how you can love me better. And that's how you know you're in a healthy partnership, because when it's unhealthy, you need to stifle that, and you don't want to, you're always in this conversation of I'm too much, I'm asking for too much, I'm too high maintenance, I may chase them away. And so a healthy partnership, it's really important to know that you don't need to be healed. You don't need to be fixed. However, you get to be in responsibility and communicate with your partner and let people know how to best love you and how to best support you. And that's how you know that you're in a healthy dynamic.
I love that. I love that. So here's a question for you, because I have had this experience before with people too, which is I think sometimes there are circumstances where we're doing all the quote unquote right things, we're communicating with our partners, they say they're going to change, but we're still feeling a lot of, insecurities inside of us, and we're still not feeling like we're able to progress forward. You know, what are your thoughts on that? Because for a bit of context, my experience with that has taught me that I think sometimes, I don't want to say we've got more healing to do, but I think I would say that sometimes I think we need to have acceptance
Mm-hmm.
of not only ourselves, but also our partner's capabilities too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, on a dynamic where it may not have, all parts to it to be healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we know how hard it is to change, right? Like, we think of how much work it takes to truly change a habit or a thought pattern or a behavior. And so the biggest thing is to make sure you're with someone who is open to changing and actually open to that growth with you. Because it's very, very hard to change someone, like very hard. And so if someone has a pattern that's not serving them, you can of course let someone know, hey, it hurts me when you do this, or when this happened, I made up a story that blah, 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 right? And that's, what we were talking about earlier, where relationships are a mirror. So I learned in this relationship with Ryan that I have a tendency to be passive aggressive, and that comes from being a people pleaser and, saying yes when I really want to say no, or overextending myself and then, saying things under my breath, right? And so just having a partner who is open to changing and who you can say, hey, this behavior, this may be a blind spot for you. Like, you may not realize that this is something you do. This is a tendency you have, and it makes me feel this way. So someone who's committed to growing, that's the number one thing. And also knowing your bare minimum, right? Like, when is it time to walk away? Are you being disrespected, or is this someone's blind spot, right? And are you holding them to a standard that you don't hold yourself to? It always comes back to you and the way that you're being in integrity with yourself.
I completely agree with everything you said. And I think also I want to say too, we need to have more self-compassion because as you said, we're going to have the passive aggressive moment. We're going to blow up when the dishes aren't done. We're going to, react badly when our partner doesn't come back on time. Like, it's like, okay, like, hold it to, like, not hold it together, like as in calm down, but as in like, it's okay to fall apart
Mhm.
because I think from those fractures, we're then like, oh, great. I didn't know that that was going to happen. Now I know that I actually can work on this thing consciously with my partner, work through it, and actually get together with this too. Because I think so often we're acting in our relationships. We almost don't want to let, these parts of us fall out because we're scared of what might happen. Oh no, I might lose this partner if I'm honest and let them know that I've had a history of cheating. Oh no, I might lose this partner if I tell them, how insecure I am about them in this particular way. And it's like, it's okay. I mean, I'm talking to healthy people, like, it's okay to have a modicum of like self-compassion for yourself too, because it's like, if you've been groomed in an environment which wasn't particularly healthy and these are your patterns of behavior and you're aware of them and you want to change them, I mean, like you said, change isn't going to happen like that. It's something where it's gradual, and you psychologically, I think, need to feel safe in that space. And I think that so many people, don't feel a sense of safety in themselves that it just becomes sort of like extra layers to their onion that they want to like cover up the parts that are, not as attractive. But
Right.
it's like who we are. Like, let it happen and just see how everything goes from there.
I mean, but what would you say for someone to get to that place? Because when I hear you say that, I'm like, yeah. And that's, representation of where we're at. We've faced a lot of uncomfortable things. We've, done a lot of healing. And so what would you say? I want to ask you, what would you say to someone who, is in that place where they don't really have a ton of self-compassion for themselves, and they maybe they have parts of themselves they're scared to reveal, or there could be, like, there were things for me that I literally thought, and it was because of a comment my ex-boyfriend made, but I made up a story. I was like, no one will date me because of this thing, like something that went on in my family. I'm like, oh my God, if I were to, like, that would be a deal breaker for someone. And then the moment I told it to Ryan, it was like, oh, pass the ketchup. Like, it was like no big deal at all. So what would you say to someone who, maybe isn't on the other side, where they're just like okay to be themselves and they really do want to attract their partner, but they have those fears?
That is a wonderful question. And my answer isn't simple, but I think that we actually have to meet that part of ourselves.
Hmm.
I think, and I'm going to break that down. I think that we have to sit with that part of ourselves that's not attractive. We have to really, or the story that we have, and actually work through it as well. I've had many shameful stories I've had about myself. Like, I mean, I've had moments where I've done things where I was like, oh my God, that will be my deal breaker in a relationship too. Now, granted, I'm not in partnership right now, but I think I can give, examples of how this has turned out in my friend relationships too, because I think they're an extension of this entire experience too. I had moments of real shame around my behavior, particularly with my family and things that had happened. And I remember I just had to spend some quality time just sitting with that and really allowing myself to just work through it and be like, okay, well, this is a deeply shameful experience that I'm sitting with. It did not feel good to react the way I did in this particular dynamic.
Hmm.
And am I still in the same environment, circumstance where this would happen again? And if it were to happen again, how would I work through that experience in the moment? And how would I like to let people know about this? One thing I'm a big proponent of too is being very transparent, consciously, of what we know. Like, I mean, obviously there are going to be things that come up that we're just like, we didn't even know came up. But like, for things for me, for instance, I know that like there are certain things that trigger me. And I'm like, I just let my partner know gradually over time and say, hey, I just need to let you know when X happens, it kind of makes me feel a bit uncomfortable in this particular way. I just thought I'd let you know because this is how I might react if this were to happen. And I just need to let you know that. But I'd say that it's one of those things where you have to meet those parts of yourselves that have really been exiled in a way and feel a deep sense of shame and allow yourself the capacity to forgive yourself for
Right.
some of those things. But I think the stage to getting there is not forgive and forget. It's actually to feel your emotions around it. And I'm a big proponent of rage journaling and actually allowing people to feel a lot of the anger that's come up from that, then get to the grief, the shame, whatever emotion it may be, to process that.
Mm, yeah, that's huge. That's a really amazing answer. And yeah, it definitely like we get to have that level of bravery where we are, sorry, bug is barking in the background. I don't know if you can hear me.
The most secure relationship of all.
Right? Yeah, it's really brave to be willing to look at things that parts of you that you try to avoid. I think that's the bravest thing that you can ever do. And that's I love what you said, Ken, because that's the first step for anyone is the willingness, because it's actually easier to avoid. It's easier to, go drink. It's easier to, find a new series on Netflix and watch that. There's so many ways to avoid. Even working at times can be a way to avoid. And I've certainly done that. It's really interesting in my healing journey that I've been on. Like, I feel like this is like the next level healing journey for me. I'm working a lot less than I ever have. And what I'm learning is that work was a really great way to avoid. And there was a point in time, and it really was not that long ago where I was like, hold up, what do I even like to do in my free time? What am I not doing when I'm not, thinking of new content, or, that's what I had trained myself to do. And so it's really learning how to be with yourself too, and actually be with yourself. Because you could be like, yeah, I love spending time with myself, but it's like, are you on your phone? Are you reading? Are you taking energy in? Like, when are you spending that time with yourself? And I think that's the catalyst to any growth, any transformation, is that willingness to be with yourself and look at things that we often try to avoid or hide.
I completely agree. And I want to say, as someone who's single, I've had an abundance of time to start doing that for myself because I feel like I've been able to just sit. And I think COVID's been, a blessing in disguise for that too, because many of us have had to sort of start, working through the muck that's been coming up because we haven't had, I know you and I have obviously been busy entrepreneurs, but like we haven't had, the capacity to avoid a lot of that stuff. We've had to sit with it, and now it's coming up, and a lot of us are feeling a sense of anxiety, a sense of depression, a sense of existential dread. And I say to a lot of us that are going through this, that's okay. That's part of the human experience, and it's actually there to shape and give us messages about things that we may not have even realized about ourselves. Like, I spent a good month in March where I just was faced with a whole bunch of things where because I'd done so much work through a lot of trauma and healing, I was like, who the hell am I even now? Like, I don't even know who I am. I don't even know why I'm doing what I'm doing with work. And the profound part of that was actually really being able to look at myself under the lens of who I'm becoming without the stories and the baggage that I had back in the day. And I think the beauty of that is really connecting more with our intuition and also with what feels good. Like, you're saying before, oh, well, I needed to figure out what I even love doing for myself. Like, what do I even enjoy for myself? Is it actually being on the phone, or is it actually spending time in stillness for myself and sitting with me rather than avoiding those tough things? And I had similar conversations with myself as well. Like, I remember, I think book reading became sort of like avoidance of itself too. We read all this self-development and, it has its place, but unless you're actually doing the work on yourself and actually allowing yourself to go through those dark parts of yourself, you can read The Secret and think, oh, well, I should never have a negative thought in my life, but that's not healing. You
Mm-hmm.
need to actually accept a lot of that. Otherwise, you're bypassing, and that comes up in our relationships.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. It's so easy to, especially with personal development books. And I feel like, we attract people who maybe are still going through things that we've maybe gone through and moved past. And that's totally, I attract so many clients who they've read a ton of books, they're very familiar with concepts and stuff, but it's really about actually doing it and actually integrating it. And that's where transformation comes. And, um, yeah, and I think I shared this, and I think you maybe said you were doing the same thing for a minute, like taking a pause from reading personal development books, because
Yeah.
there's always more to learn. There's always something we can apply to our business or something we can help clients with. But I'm sure, as you know, Ken, and why this is why you're such a phenomenal coach and mentor, is that our experiences, what we've moved through, what we've allowed ourselves to heal through, we're actually able to turn around and hand a roadmap to clients and actually guide them through that more than what a book could do. And as a coach, our goal is to really have you get to the place that, we're at, or the place you want to be, way, way, way faster than it took us. Like, you know, we got there on a rowboat, right? And, we want you to take the jet plane. And that's, this is a whole other conversation around that. But, just know that books are really great. Books are really powerful. And if you're someone who you're like, I've read a lot of books, but I still struggle with XYZ, there's a reason, because information that's a very, very small piece of transformation. So if you feel behind, if you feel like, oh, I've read these books, I should know more things. It's not about knowing, it's about living through experiences.
Yeah, it's about being. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's really about integrating and allowing ourselves to just work through our own part of our journey, because you're absolutely right. Like, people come to us because we're at a stage where people would like to be at. And I think that, we cannot heal what we cannot feel, and we also cannot heal others what we haven't healed in ourselves. And I think there is a tendency at times for us in this world, and this is a very general sweeping comment, applies to relationships too, for us to project and to, illustrate a version of who we are that's palatable, that's tasty. That's not us. And the reason that it impacts the relationship sometimes is that if we're not willing to sit with reality and where we sit in ourselves, we're essentially fabricating, and we're not allowing ourselves to really just go through things properly. And that's part of the reason why I'm so adamant when clients come to me. I'm not saying I'm here to get you in a relationship within 3 months. It's not about that. I'm so against that, because anyone can bend over backwards to impress a partner, to win the partner over, and to be in a relationship. But to get to where you're at, to where I'm at, to feel safe, secure on our own, I mean, that's a lifelong journey. But we're certainly a lot closer than we were maybe a couple of years ago. And I think that's a place that's really important for each of us on this journey. Now, out of respect of time, last thing I just wanted to say about, or ask you, Valerie, before we wrap up is, I'd love to hear from you, especially considering this is your area of expertise, self-love. When it comes for people getting into the state where they're really able to be that mirror, going back to being able to reflect, who they are with what they want, and adopting some of the practices of self-love, what would you share to a person in terms of like what they need to start working on to get themselves in a place where they're really able to attract that safety, security, and that partner who's healthy for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is something that is tough to do because you may not like the answer, and it's if that you do this thing. So it's really easy because every relationship, it's kind of feedback. It's feedback of how you're showing up, right? So in the past, when I was in toxic relationships, that was feedback for me. It didn't mean I was a bad person, but it was feedback for me, why I was available for that. And so it's very easy to bash our exes. They were this way, he's this, he's that. And the hardest thing you will do is really look at yourself and be like, well, how was I available for that?
Mm-hmm.
What was in me that kept showing up for that allowed that into my life. And it's not to bring a place of shame, because everything is neutral. It's the meaning we assign to it. So the way you're going to grow is, instead of getting in self beat up, being able to look at, like, I feel like now with a lot of the healing I've done, I'm able to look at things that I've done in the past. I'm able to look at even past relationships and feel literally no energetic charge around it anymore. I'm just like, oh, that happened. I used to be this way. I used to not feel worthy, right? And done a lot of work around that. So for you, the first thing you want to do is really look at, when you look at past relationships, it's like, well, what were they reflecting in me, right? Like, I didn't feel worthy. I wasn't there for myself emotionally. So of course I attracted someone who I couldn't count on emotionally. And just look at that firstly. And then relationships are a beautiful way to provide that contrast. It's very easy to be like, hey, I didn't like the way this person treated me. So something I always ask my clients when someone's in the, like, I don't want, experience, when they're like, well, I don't want someone who would lie, or I don't want someone who's emotionally unavailable. So it's like, okay, great. So what do you actually want? I know it sounds so simple. You must know what it is that you actually want. And that's okay if you've never had a healthy relationship. That's okay if you've never felt safe, because that doesn't matter. What matters is what you choose today. So those are the first two things that I would do as you're starting on your journey toward self-love and really getting in the place of attracting your dream relationship. Because I got to tell you, part of the reason I stayed single for 3 years was because I spent so much energy and time and months in my precious life, like, wishing bad things upon one of my exes. Like, there was zero responsibility on my end for why the relationship didn't work. And I spent that energy focused on how he was a bad person, or how he was this, how he was that, wishing bad upon him. And I'm not sure if you've read Florence Shin's The Game of Life and How to Play It. It's one of
No.
her books. She talks about, like, just how everything's a boomerang. So it's like, I wished bad upon him. It came back to me. And, like, I literally was like, I didn't want him to be happy. So that came back to me, where I truly was not happy in that time. I didn't experience happiness. So yeah, our exes can be a beautiful teacher. And if you're ready to attract a healthy relationship, get clear on what you want, get clear on parts of you that have led you to these unhealthy relationships, and know that you can change and you can have better, and you can do it consciously, one step at a time.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think the last thing I'd also add, especially on the note of exes, because boy oh boy has that kept me stuck too. I'm gonna say something that's actually for me has worked. It may not work for everyone. It's kind of like getting to Mount Everest. If what you were describing is sort of like starting from base camp, my thing that I found is really practical is actually getting to forgiveness and actually just feeling a sense of indifference. Because if you've still got hate for an ex, they're holding mental real estate. You know, they're taking up space from allowing you to welcome a healthy person into your life. And if you are not at a place of indifference where you're like, honestly, they were a great teacher for me, didn't work out, wish them all the best, and you can say that honestly without feeling a sense of resentment or guilt, I'd say that's something to work on sooner rather than later, because that's where a lot of people, including myself, did for a while, keep getting stuck because you keep repeating the same patterns and you've still got an energetic cord where you might even be trying subconsciously in the vain hope of thinking maybe I will get it right with someone who's just like this person. The answer is if your type hasn't worked now, when is it ever really going to work out? Probably never. But that's, that's up to everyone else to figure out for themselves. Valerie, thank you so much for jumping on today to have this chat with me. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I love, love, love our chat. I know you and I could jam forever because we're super similar, and what we believe, what we stand for. And for me, I hang out on Instagram a lot. So my handle is at the Mindful Babe. I also have a podcast called the Mindful Babes Podcast. You can find me in those two places. Those are the main places I hang out. I'd love to connect with you. You can DM me. I love hearing if anything resonated, if you caught this live. And yeah, this was really fun.
I agree. I loved every minute of it too, Valerie. You've been such an inspiration to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for your time. And for anyone from your audience who's watching, I'm at ken.reed.co. I'm a holistic healing coach. And yeah, it's been an absolute jam talking with you as always, Valerie. I hope you and the rest of your community have an amazing day. And I'm sure we'll be in touch down the road soon.
Yes, of course. Thanks so much, Ken.
Speak to you later, Valerie. Bye bye.